As we head into the holiday break, what does another marquee loss mean heading into 2025? You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, we just want to make sure to say how thankful we are for you. It's not Thanksgiving, but it is a time where we feel really grateful for all that our audience has done for us. This podcast has grown so much, and it's not hyperbole. As of today, this episode will go out December 23rd. Locked On UConn is the number one college basketball show on Locked On Podcast Network, according to Apple's Top 100 rankings. And it's because of fans like you who value great UConn content. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering both UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world. And we're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve. To show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send underserved kids to UConn games, and making monthly donations to Bleeding Blue for Good, supporting NIL initiatives that make a difference. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, and leave a review wherever you listen. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So with that being said, we're going to bring in a guest to this show. UConn had a tough loss against USC over the weekend. This guest was actually supposed to talk about it. We were going to do something last Friday, but we both agreed that it'd be best if we would kind of see what the results are of this game and then talk about it today on Monday. So let's bring in Mitchell Northam. Mitch, you work at North Carolina Public Radio. You host the women's basketball show. You're an AP Top 25 voter. So we appreciate your expertise on the subject. What does another marquee loss mean to this UConn program? Because as we've talked about on the show countless times with guests and just to myself, the Big East doesn't give UConn a ton of options when it comes to marquee matchups. I thought this was a must win for UConn, as if there's ever a must win in December, just based off of those stipulations. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think once they get into Big East play, like they're going to clean up and they're going to do just fine, like they always do. I think in terms of, it is something that matters. Like when you get into March and you talk about, who's going to get the number one overall seeds, right? And how is that ranking going to shake out? Because now, you've got losses to Notre Dame and USC. You do make up for it with those wins, over North Carolina. I'm not sure how the committee is going to see that as like a neutral site or a road game. I mean, it was played in Greensboro. It's, pretty much a home game for North Carolina. You got to win over Ole Miss. You got to win over Louisville, Iowa State. So you have some good wins in there, and they are going to get, two more cracks at good non-con wins in February when they play at Tennessee and out South Carolina. So there are chances, I think, to make up ground. But certainly like losing this home game in the fashion that they did to USC, where, the margin was so slim, it was an absolutely great game. But when you talk about, the resumes, when we get into March Madness and how the seeds work and, who's going to get sent out West or who's going to get sent to Birmingham, I think that stuff will matter. Is UConn, if we have a UConn USC rematch in the Elite Eight, like we did last year, if that game's played on the West Coast, is that a factor? I don't know. So you have to think about that. So I don't think like it changes, like my expectations for them. Like I think they certainly still have the potential to get back to the Final Four and, as good a case as any other team, really to win the national title. But I think that this game could affect how that seeding works. And then depending on, how they play against Tennessee and South Carolina.
Okay. No, it makes a ton of sense. Do you feel like, watching that game on Saturday night, we talked about on the live show afterwards, live post-game reaction show, that I felt like the bigs really kind of were disappointing. Do you still feel like with someone like Jana, she's still kind of getting her feet wet coming off the Achilles, but then conversely, someone like Ice, who I initially thought this year made some good strides, has kind of regressed a little bit. We're to the point where Gino's not even starting her a lot of times in the second half, and kind of trying to get a different mixture of talent out there. I think he's still searching for that post presence outside of Sarah Strong. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do wonder if this might be a theme with UConn. We'll see how they do against South Carolina, which is another team that has depth in the post and has, they're really good. It's a really good rebounding team, South Carolina, right? Always has been under Dawn Staley. But yeah, I look at this game against USC, and they have two really good post players in Kiki Iriafen and Rhea Marshall, who combined for 20 rebounds. I look at the rebounds on UConn's side, and Sarah Strong has 13, and that's great. But then your next best leading rebounder was Paige Beckers with 3.
Right.
And so you need somebody, I think, somebody else to step up in the front court and kind of do their part in getting you some rebounds. I mean, if UConn has 2 more offensive rebounds in this game, it's a 2-point game, maybe that's the difference. You get a shot back or whatever. I do think that the rebounding margin is a little bit concerning for UConn. I'm looking at some of their stats right now on Her Hoop Stats. UConn ranks 247th in the country in offensive rebounds per game. And like that just has to be better. Like you can't have that. Their defensive rebounding rate is okay. It's 31st in the country. But yeah, like they need someone else in the front court aside from Sarah Strong. She's doing everything she can. She's playing great. You need somebody else, I think, to step up, particularly in the offensive rebounding department.
I couldn't agree more. It's insane that they are that number. You were very cordial with that. You were like, it's 240. That needs to get better. That's atrocious. Like that's so bad.
Yeah,
that's so bad. In particular, when we're talking, like, if you go back to the Notre Dame game, they got destroyed on the glass in that game too. So, but that's a great segue because we're gonna take a break, and when we return, I'm going to ask you, you did say that you still feel like this team has, a good a chance as anyone to win the national championship, but I may have a little pushback there, not because I don't agree with you, but I'm curious at certain positions if they have the athletic ability or if it's just about heart and desire, because offensive rebounding, as we know, and rebounding in general, sometimes it's about feel and, just wanting to get the ball. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we return, we'll talk with Mitchell on if this UConn team does have enough and potential future fixes in the third segment coming up after the break. Have you ever looked at your bank statement and found charges for subscriptions you forgot or didn't even realize you had? I know I have. And that's where Rocket Money came to the rescue. It's like having your own personal finance assistant. Rocket Money found these sneaky subscriptions and canceled them for me in just a few taps. Rocket Money isn't just about canceling subscriptions. It's a personal finance app that helps you take control of your money. Whether it's finding and canceling unwanted subscriptions, monitoring your spending, or even lowering your bills, Rocket Money brings everything together in one great place. With over 5 million users and 500 million saved in canceled subscriptions, Rocket Money members save up to $740 a year using the app's premium features. For me, the subscription tracker has been a game changer. I've canceled a few services I wasn't even using anymore, and I've saved so much money, and I've used their goals feature app. It's helped me automatically set aside money for the future without stressing things like vacation, stuff like that. Take control of your finances with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Don't let those unwanted subscriptions drain your wallet. Start saving money today. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with your host, Mark Zanetto. We have with us a guest from North Carolina Public Radio who hosts their women's basketball show and also an AP 25 voter, Mitchell Northam. I'm saying your name right?
Yeah, Mitch Northam. You got it.
All right, cool. All right, Mitch, we talked about this a little bit pre-show, and you did say that you think UConn has as good a shot as any to win the national title. I kind of feel like I would put them lower on my list. Like I don't. Let's do this. Who's your favorite right now? Is it South Carolina, or are they not it?
It's tough. I would, I think right now, just because UCLA does have the win over South Carolina, I would give UCLA a slight edge. I would put South Carolina in that group, and I would put Notre Dame in that group. And after USC's win over UConn, I think if you asked me to predict the Final Four today, it's probably those four teams: UCLA, South Carolina, USC, and Notre Dame. With UConn right there on the fringe, and I think that UConn, despite all the problems that we talked about, specifically the offensive rebounding and the 3-point shooting defense is also atrocious, to be honest with you. Despite those two problems, they might have the best player in the country in Paige Beckers, who can, in certain games, kind of erase those problems. And you probably have the best freshman in the country in Sarah Strong, who's just going to keep getting better. So, I think when you have those two pieces, that can get you to the Final Four despite the problems that you might have.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I've argued that this is very subjective, and I know I'm biased, but Sarah Strong is as good a player in the country as anybody. You can throw Paige in there, you can throw Juju, Hannah. Like, how she impacts the game is completely like nothing I've seen on a basketball court in a very long time from a freshman. Maybe Paige, maybe Maya. These are the types of players that I would in terms of impact, what she's brought to the table, at least from a UConn perspective. So with that being said, let's say you have two. Let's be generous. Let's say you have two of the top 5 players in the country, whether freshmen or not, even 2 of the top 10, which I don't think is very far off to say. It's the others, right, that need to step up for them to be a championship level contending team. And I don't think that they are right now. And it makes me sad to say that, because at the beginning of the year I said, man, this team's going to win a national championship, because AZ was coming back. She's kind of up in the air with her knee. Aubrey Griffin is kind of close. There's no Carolyn Ducharme. So you're missing these pieces. Ayanna Patterson is out for the year. So similar to last year's team, you're missing pieces. And you also have some, I hate saying disappointing, but maybe a little frustration when it comes to KK Arnold's contributions. Some of the freshmen I didn't think have popped as much as Sarah. Ali Zabal was supposed to be this like sharpshooter that could kind of get them points from time to time. What do you see from the others, and what do they need if we don't get a full AZ FUD back?
Yeah, I mean, UConn does need, like you mentioned, those others, to definitely sort of step up and play their role and kind of play to the expectations that I think a lot of fans and frankly the expectations that Gino and the coaches have talked about. I've been a little disappointed in Caitlin Jen so far this season.
A little bit.
Just the way, and I know that she's not getting all the shots that she used to get at Princeton, but just comparatively, the numbers that she put up at Princeton compared to the numbers that she put up at UConn, she's just not scoring in the same way. Her assists are right there, the same part, but if she could get you 5 more points per game, I think that would help UConn out. I think, definitely in the rebounding department and definitely in the defense department, you could ask for more from Shade, from KK Arnold, from Ice Brady. Yeah, and I think at this point, when we talk about AZ, it's kind of I think if it's really hard to even what is the best case scenario at this point with AZ FUD. It's super, disappointing, and there's nothing really that she can do about it. She got hurt. She's gotten hurt a bunch of times. It kind of is what it is, and this is the situation now. But going down the stretch in the sort of back half of the season, by the time we get to February, if she's consistently playing 15 to 20 minutes a game, I think that might be your best case scenario. And if you have that, that's a really good thing. I mean, she is still, one of the best shooters in the country. People talk all the time about her shooting form and that sort of thing. But it's hard to count on that, right? You just don't know if she's going to be available. So yeah, in the meantime, I wonder if this USC loss might be a wake-up call, because you just kind of look at the rest of the box score and it's okay, you got 22 from Sarah, you got 22 from Paige, and then everywhere else it's kind of we needed more, right? So I wonder if Gino uses this as kind of a wake-up call to sort of get everybody else in gear and together.
Yeah, and I also feel too, it's walking a tightrope with the AZ conversation too, because you don't want to discourage her, in terms of like her whether or not she comes back full strength. But like, there's got to be a part of him. Maybe they just talk about this privately with the coaches that are like, we can't rely on her being back 100%. So we have to kind of coach in that manner, right? And I think you could see it right from the back because she dressed. She could have played more against USC and she didn't. And I think that was by design because the worst thing that could have happened was for her to get hurt again in this game. And I think that's going to be it's got to be like a mentally draining thing for Gino and Chris to kind of go, well, do we have her full strength or do we not? Like that's the
right.
That's the tough part. And I also feel like, to your point about Caitlin Chen, I agree, but I also disagree. And the reason why I disagree is because let's go with that first. I was on with T Baker, who covers the Big East for the Next, and he asked me about players that I was like happy with, and in a different way, I said Caitlin because she's the only one that I think Gino and his staff can count on outside of Paige and Sarah right now.
Mm-hmm.
That they're
That's
always
fair.
going to get a similar performance. Now, you could argue that she needs to play better, and that's fine because she does come from a pedigree of being a better scorer and stuff like that. But I think at this point, that's where this team is, and maybe it gets better. So before we get to the next segment, I wanted to ask this question because you've been covering women's college basketball for a while now. Do you think UConn fans are still getting used to the fact that you can't, like I'm wearing this 2002 perfect season shirt, that there's just not going to be undefeated teams anymore. Like and if they are, they're going to be really special teams, and that this is a new era of college basketball where, we just talked about it. Your Final Four predictions right now doesn't have UConn in it, so that doesn't happen very often.
Right.
Is this like just a dawning of a new era in college basketball, and do UConn fans have to try to accept it?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, South Carolina went undefeated last year, but man, they had some really close games and probably should have lost to Tennessee in the SEC tournament if not for literally the only three-pointer Camila Cardoso has ever made in her entire career. A miracle kind of type of shot. So yeah, I just think, Gino and Courtney Banghart both talked a little bit about this after that game in Greensboro, where like, you look back at those runs that the Stewie teams had in the mid 2010s. And I think that those runs made a lot of athletic directors around the country go, why can't we do that? What's going on there?
Right.
And it was just UConn was investing in women's basketball in a way that only really a handful of teams around the country were at that time. And you could point to like Tennessee and a couple other schools that were doing the same, Stanford, but it wasn't as widespread as it is now, where you have multiple teams and multiple conferences. I mean, the investment in women's basketball has grown, and that's made, not all the good players go to UConn and Tennessee anymore. They go to South Carolina, they go to North Carolina, they go to Iowa. So it's a little bit more spread out now. And I think we just have an increased amount of parity where, not only are we probably not going to have another undefeated UConn team, but we might not ever see another undefeated women's team win the national championship, period. I say that even though South Carolina just won last year doing that. But like I said, like they had a couple lucky breaks there, down the stretch. So it's got to be, like a really, really special team, and that South Carolina team last year certainly was. So UConn fans are probably, I think, getting used to that.
I don't think so, man. If you come on our live show and you can see our chat after these two losses, I would tell you that the UConn fan base is not happy with and even to the point of the ridiculous, which is like Gino's lost a step. He doesn't recruit the best players anymore. This has been happening for years, like all this stuff. Like, instead of the opposite, which is giving credit to other programs who are essentially following Gino's blueprint. So in essence, it's Gino's fault that other teams have caught up because they've copied the program, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how we talk about the rebounding and the 3-point shooting defense, and really just the lack of depth on this team is really, I think, what the problem is, like the depth of just
1000%.
super talented players. I kind of wonder what UConn fans think of what Maryland's doing this year with with 3 former UConn players on that team playing big roles. Sailor Parfenbarger among them, Mir McLean playing well. Those are 2 players. I mean, right there off the bat. They also have Amari DeBerry, who are playing really well for Maryland, and like UConn could certainly use this year to help them out.
Yeah, that's just throwing salt in our wounds. I appreciate that, Mitch. No, I think you're right. But that's also kind of just college basketball, women
Sure.
or men, right? That's just part of the deal now. All right, well, listen, we're gonna take a quick break, and then I want to ask Mitch if he's tasked as the general manager of the UConn women's basketball program. What are the fixes? Like, what would your recommendations be to the greatest coach of all time? No pressure. All right. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about that after this. What's up, NFL fans? The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season with a strong bet with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. If you're in honestly, I got to do that over. I completely fucked it up. Sorry, Mitch. Jesus Christ. We're going to do this, and I'm going to cut it out. And son of a bitch, where is it? I'm just going to keep swearing until I get it right. The NFL playoffs are just around the corner, but there's still time to cash in on the regular season excitement with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can end the season on a high note with $250 in bonus bets when you make your first $5 bet and win. FanDuel makes betting exciting. I had a person win on an anytime touchdown just on the game with the Giants, who are a terrible team, but I knew that guy was going to score a touchdown. So it's not about just winning and losing. It's about, you can bet on anytime players, touchdowns, who scores the most points. So head over to FanDuel.com and sign up today. That's FanDuel.com to score $250 in bonus bets with your first $5 wager. Make every play count with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with Mitchell Northam from the North Carolina Public Radio and an AP voter in the women's top 25. All right, so we've talked about a lot of stuff, and we've talked about the Marquee loss to USC. We've talked about if UConn has enough. You still think they do. I do too, but I have a little more, maybe a more glum picture on it, because I'm too close to it. A lot of injuries, a lot of things that are happening with this program. What are, if you had the reins to UConn's program? Let's say Gino was like, all right, Mitch, you're going to be my GM or my recruiting coordinator, or anything that comes with it. And we are essentially like a consultant, come in. Not that UConn needs this, but I'm curious because they're kind of at an inflection point in this season where, like we talked about, not a ton of big time games coming up in the Big East. And so I'm curious, what are the fixes that you would recommend this team have? Something, and can they get to those in season, or is it stuff that they have to do program wide?
Yeah, I think there's some stuff that you can do in season. I mean, I would start off with playing, giving more minutes to Jane Alafi. I look at her numbers, and she's UConn's second leading rebounder. And for some reason, she only played 6 minutes against USC. She wasn't in foul trouble or anything like that. I look at her numbers this season, and I look at UConn's problems, and that kind of seems like something to me that says she should be playing more. Like I said, she's the second leading rebounder on the team with 5.5 per game, and that's only in 15.5 minutes. So, if you want to fix the rebounding problem, maybe start there. The other stuff, I mean, the 3-point shooting defense, that's probably a scheme thing, or really a more of a want to, you just kind of have to emphasize that. There are other problems. I mean, the depth thing is kind of, I don't know if you can fix that in the regular season, unless you give AZ Fudd, super soldier serum and,
right.
Boost her up. That might just be something that you're just going to have to work harder to retain your players in the off season and keep them healthy. I look at some of the contending teams, around the country. Notre Dame has this problem too. Notre Dame is not a deep team at all, and they're dealing with injuries too. And they don't really have they're missing Maddie Westbeld, one of their best front court players. But But South Carolina is a team that is super, super deep. And I think when you get into March Madness, that depth helps. Now saying that there are teams that have made the Final Four or further with a really tight rotation. Virginia Tech did it a couple of years ago with basically a 6-player rotation. Biggest thing I would say, make sure you wrap Paige Beckers and Sarah Strong in bubble wrap and make sure they stay healthy throughout this stretch. But yeah, in terms of like just short-term fixes, I would want to see more minutes for Jana Alafi and kind of see what she has. Maybe they're waiting for Big East play for that opportunity where,
Sure.
To be honest, your schedule is a little bit softer when you get in the conference play, and maybe you can figure some things out there when you're playing against the Providences and Xaviers of the world, instead of, these games against USC and Notre Dame and all that. So I kind of want to see, how this UConn team looks, if there are any changes, if there are any big fixes, when they roll into Knoxville on February 6th.
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting game. And I also I think we'll also know by then. I think we'll know by then, and definitely by the time they play South Carolina, if some of these fixes happen. Like, right, are we going to get more minutes from Jana, or is AZ going to be back fully, or is she going to be kind of almost like a part-time player? Like to take a term from the W or the NBA, it's the load management stuff. Are we going to see some of that with her, just so that the load is less, so there's less stress on that knee, but you're still getting production? Because back in the beginning of the season, before she was even available, I asked both Maggie Vanoni and Emily Adams, who are great beat reporters for us in the Hartford Courant and for Connecticut Insider, that like adding AZ is kind of like adding someone at the trade deadline. But if she gets hurt again, which she did, you're back where you started. So I wonder if they're going to temper those expectations as time goes on.
Yeah, I think AZ at this point is like a luxury. Like, you consider her. Right. If you can get her in February and March and hopefully in April for UConn, if you can get her for 15 to 20 minutes a game, any AZ FUD you can get, I think, is a big bonus for UConn. And it would certainly help them a lot, I think, just to give them, a weapon off the bench that, can knock down 3-pointers, and is a big time playmaker. If she can be healthy enough to give you those 20 minutes a game. And maybe that's why she didn't play against USC. Maybe they just figure, hey, it's December. If we lose this game, it sucks, but it's not a deal breaker. Let's make sure that we have AZ for down the stretch when the games matter more. So I wonder if maybe that was the strategy, because you mentioned she dressed but didn't play.
Right.
So maybe that's the thinking with her, just making sure that you have her for March and beyond.
For sure. Before we go, I have to apologize to you. I just realized I spelled your name wrong in the title here. It is Northam, not Norham. So
that's right.
But your Twitter X handle is correct. That's at Primetime Mitch, correct? Well, Mitch, we appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell people where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the Twitter handle's right there, Primetime Mitch. I'm on Blue Sky too, kind of posting the same things there, on Instagram at Primetime Mitch. And yeah, I host the women's basketball podcast with Mia O'Brien, part of the OG family. We post new episodes every week, working on one today. And yeah, I'm at North Carolina Public Radio and also doing some freelance work at USA Today's For the Win, and sometimes at The Next.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your perspective. We'd love to have you back when there's time. And this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. Just wanted to say, for Mitch, I'm Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked on, stay connected, and to remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. And as always, go Huskies.